The 1980s weren't just neon lights and synthesizers, they were the decade of cinematic chaos, a time when filmmakers tested how much violence, gore, and shock an audience could endure. But some films went too far. They vanished from theaters, seized by governments, condemned by critics, and whispered about for decades. These aren't your typical horror flicks. These are the 15 most brutal exploitation films that got banned. Number 15, Cannibal Ferox, 1981. When Cannibal Ferox hit theaters, it didn't just want to shock, it wanted to offend everyone. Marketed as the most violent film ever made, this Italian exploitation nightmare pushed its audience past the brink of endurance. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, it followed a group of travelers who venture into the Amazon, only to become prisoners of a vengeful tribe. The film's intent was to expose civilized hypocrisy, showing humans as the real savages. But most viewers didn't see the message. They saw blood. Scenes of animal cruelty, dismemberment, and gruesome mutilation earned it bans in over 30 countries, including the UK, where it was labeled a video nasty. Some copies were seized and destroyed by authorities. Behind the scenes, Lenzi feuded with fellow director Ruggero Deodato, creator of Cannibal Holocaust, each claiming the other stole their ideas. Audiences fainted, critics walked out, and even horror fans called it torture disguised as cinema. The controversy only fueled its underground fame. Decades later, Cannibal Ferox found a second life on home video, embraced by cult collectors who prized it as the ultimate forbidden film. It's now studied as an artifact of excess, a brutal reflection of a time when shock itself was the art form. Sometimes the line between realism and obscenity isn't crossed, it's devoured. Number 14, I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Though released in the late 70s, I Spit on Your Grave became an icon of 1980s underground horror once the VHS era hit. Directed by Mir Zarchi, it followed a woman seeking revenge after being brutally assaulted by rural attackers, a story that critics called the most horrifying revenge film ever made. The movie's raw style, no score, no Hollywood gloss, no mercy, shocked even seasoned horror audiences. Banned outright in several countries, including Ireland, Norway, and parts of Canada, it was labeled obscene and misogynistic. But others saw it as a defiant statement against male brutality, a feminist manifesto hidden under grime and terror. During its limited theatrical run, theaters were vandalized, and protesters demanded its removal. Roger Ebert famously gave it 0 stars, calling it a vile bag of garbage. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, its notoriety, underground audiences traded bootlegs, whispering about scenes too graphic to describe. By the time the 80s ended, I Spit on Your Grave had become a rallying cry for exploitation cinema, proof that a low-budget film could scar an entire generation. It inspired remakes, debates, and documentaries about censorship itself. Love it or loathe it, the film remains cinema's dirtiest open wound, a reminder that revenge stories can cut both ways. Number 13, The Driller Killer, 1979. Before American Psycho made violent chic, The Driller Killer made it nauseating. Directed, written, and starred in by Abel Ferrara, this urban nightmare blurred the line between art and insanity. It follows a struggling New York painter who, tormented by poverty and noise, descends into madness, venting his rage on the homeless with a power drill. When released in the UK during the video boom, the VHS cover, featuring a drill tearing into a man's forehead, became infamous. It was banned under Britain's video nasty laws, blamed for inspiring copycat crimes and corrupting youth. Authorities seized tapes and even prosecuted distributors. The irony? Most people outraged by it had never seen it. Behind the lens, Ferrara wanted to expose the rot of urban decay, the collapse of creativity in a capitalist world. But critics only saw chaos. Some called it an endurance test of grime and gore, yet its grainy visuals and grimy realism captured a decaying New York City like no other film could. By the late 80s, The Driller Killer had achieved cult status, a punk-era time capsule that critics reevaluated as a brutal scream against artistic suffocation. Today it's studied in film schools as both a masterpiece of urban horror and a cautionary tale about censorship hysteria. Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones society ignores until they start to scream. Number 12. Faces of Death, 1978. Few films blurred the line between reality and horror like Faces of Death. Billed as a documentary, it stitched together footage, some real, some staged, depicting executions, accidents, and rituals of death from around the world. Directed by Conan Leselaire, a pseudonym for John Allen Schwartz, the film dared viewers to ask, what's entertainment and what's exploitation? Governments around the world answered quickly. It was banned in over 40 countries, branded the most disturbing film ever made. In the UK, it joined the Video Nasty blacklist. Police confiscated tapes. In New Zealand, possession alone could bring prosecution. Behind the scenes, the film's mystery deepened. Were the deaths real? The director claimed most were faked with prosthetics, yet some scenes were authentic news footage. That ambiguity only fueled its legend. Audiences dared each other to watch it, turning viewings into underground rites of passage. Critics called it immoral. Sociologists called it a reflection of humanity's darkest curiosity. Despite condemnation, it spawned sequels, imitators, and a morbid fascination with death tapes. Its VHS copies, circulated like contraband. Today, Faces of Death stands as a symbol of the 1980s obsession with taboos, a time when horror confronted mortality head-on. It asked one haunting question: why do we keep watching, even when we want to look away? Number 11. Maniac, 1980. In 1980, New York became the killing ground for one of cinema's most unflinching portraits of insanity, Maniac. Directed by William Lustig and starring Joe Spinell, the film followed Frank Zito, a deranged loner haunted by childhood trauma, who roams the city at night, murdering women and collecting their scalps. Audiences weren't ready. Critics called it a new low in horror. Women's groups protested theaters. Newspapers decried it as pure misogyny. In the UK, it was banned until heavy cuts were made. In Germany, it was outlawed entirely. The controversy was so intense that Lustig received death threats and screenings were canceled across America. Yet, beneath the gore, Spinell, known for roles in Rocky and The Godfather, crafted a disturbingly human performance. The film's grimy, claustrophobic atmosphere reflected the decay of 1980s New York. Graffiti, sleaze, and isolation. It wasn't just horror, it was a mirror of madness born from neglect. Tom Savini's special effects, especially the infamous shotgun scene, became legends of realism. Audiences screamed, critics turned away. But horror fans whispered about it for years, passing bootleg copies and celebrating it as underground gold. Today, Maniac is recognized as an exploitation classic, raw, relentless, and psychologically harrowing. Its influence echoes in modern thrillers that dare to show the monster within. It proved that sometimes the scariest city isn't haunted by ghosts, but by the people it forgot. Number 10. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. There are shocking films, and then there's Cannibal Holocaust. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, this Italian exploitation landmark wasn't just banned, it was put on trial. The story follows a documentary crew that ventures into the Amazon to film primitive tribes, only for their footage to reveal unimaginable atrocities, violence, manipulation, and moral collapse. Upon release, the reaction was explosive. Viewers vomited, theaters shut it down, and censors stormed in. Italy's government seized all copies, accusing Deodato of making a real snuff film. He was arrested and charged with murder, until he proved his actors were alive by bringing them to court. Still, the animal killings and realism earned it bans in over 50 countries. The production itself was chaotic, shot in the Colombian jungle with real indigenous participants, many of whom didn't speak the filmmaker's language. The crew suffered disease, malnutrition, and emotional breakdowns. Even the director later admitted he had gone too far, calling the experience a descent into madness. Yet, decades later, Cannibal Holocaust became a cult legend, hailed by scholars as a brutal allegory of Western exploitation and media voyeurism. Its found footage style inspired films like The Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity. In the end, it wasn't just about savagery in the jungle, it was about the savagery in the lens itself. Number 9. Blood-Sucking Freaks, 1976. Though technically released in the late 70s, Blood-Sucking Freaks didn't gain notoriety until the 1980s home video boom. Directed by Joel M. Reed, it was marketed as a sick circus of shock, set in a New York Grand Guignol theater, where a sadistic showman tortures victims on stage. But when audiences realized the acts might not be fake, chaos followed. Critics demanded it be banned immediately. Feminist groups protested outside theaters, calling it the most depraved film ever made. The MPAA initially gave it an X rating, later withdrawn completely. New York City officials even attempted to pull its screenings, labeling it dangerous to public morality. Behind the scenes, the cast and crew were underpaid, and the production was plagued by breakdowns. Some actors later claimed they had no idea what kind of film they were making until the final cut. The movie's blend of horror and black comedy baffled audiences. It was too grotesque for satire, too exaggerated for realism. Yet, somehow, it survived. Cult audiences kept it alive through midnight screenings and bootlegs, turning it into a perverse icon of grindhouse cinema. Trauma Entertainment eventually re-released it, cementing its status as the black sheep of exploitation horror. It dared to laugh at cruelty, forcing audiences to confront what they found entertaining and what that said about them. Number 8. The Last House on Dead End Street, 1977. A film so mysterious that for decades, nobody even knew who made it. The Last House on Dead End Street was whispered about like an urban legend, a student film gone wrong. Directed by Roger Watkins under a pseudonym, it told the story of a recently released ex-con who starts making real snuff films to exact revenge on the world that rejected him. Shot on 16mm and filled with unnerving realism, the film was banned for its disturbing content and extreme violence. Audiences couldn't believe it was fake. Its bleak, dreamlike tone made it feel like genuine found footage years before the term existed. When it resurfaced in the 1980s, bootleg copies circulated among horror collectors, passed between fans like cursed artifacts. Many believed it was real, others thought it was lost forever, buried by censors. The true story behind its creation didn't surface until the early 2000s, when Watkins finally confirmed authorship. Behind the myth, the film reflected post-Vietnam despair and the nihilism of 1970s America, a rage that carried into the exploitation boom of the 1980s. Critics eventually recognized it as a chilling experiment in psychological horror, not just a gore fest. For decades, it existed in whispers and shadows, a forgotten real that felt too real to exist and too cursed to die. Number 7. The Evil Dead, 1981. Before it became a cult franchise, The Evil Dead was a banned nightmare. Sam Raimi's debut film, made with friends and a shoestring budget in the Michigan woods, shocked audiences with its relentless energy and surreal horror. It wasn't just gory, it was possessed. The story follows 5 college students who uncover the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead, and unleash demonic forces that drive them to madness. What set it apart was Raimi's camera work, wild, frenetic, almost supernatural in its movement. But its raw intensity made censors nervous. In the UK, The Evil Dead became one of the most famous video nasties. Copies were seized, and its distributors were prosecuted under obscenity laws. Ironically, the bans only fueled its reputation. Horror fans sought it out precisely because it was forbidden. Behind the scenes, the shoot was grueling. Actors endured freezing nights, gallons of fake blood, and injuries that became part of the legend. Raimi's determination to make the ultimate experience in grueling horror paid off. It launched Bruce Campbell's career and redefined independent cinema. When it was finally re-released, critics who once condemned it now praised its inventiveness. The Evil Dead became a symbol of creative rebellion, proving that art could rise from the forbidden. It wasn't just a horror movie. It was proof that sometimes genius hides behind chaos and censorship. Number 6. Tenebrae, 1982. Dario Argento's Tenebrae wasn't just a thriller, it was a self-reflection on violence, fame, and obsession. Yet its elegant brutality got it banned across Europe, following an American author in Rome, stalked by a killer who mimics the murders in his books. The film turned into a meditation on the relationship between creator and chaos. Audiences expecting a standard giallo found something far more disturbing. psychosexual violence, psychological collapse, and meta-commentary on censorship itself. British authorities labeled it a video nasty for its explicit killings, particularly its now iconic double murder scene shot in one continuous take. Behind the camera, Argento faced backlash from moral groups accusing him of glamorizing brutality, but his vision was deliberate, a film about obsession and art devouring its own creator. Critics initially dismissed it, but later re-evaluated Tenebrae as one of Argento's most complex works, both a confession and a condemnation. Banned for nearly a decade, it only returned to screens after heavy cuts. Yet, even censored, it haunted viewers with its precision and hypnotic imagery. In the end, Argento's crime wasn't depicting violence. It was daring to show the audience that they enjoyed it. Number 5. The New York Ripper, 1982. Lucio Fulci, known as the godfather of gore, went too far even for hardened horror fans with The New York Ripper. This was no fantasy. It was a nightmare steeped in sleaze. Set in a decaying Manhattan, the story follows a sadistic killer who taunts police by mimicking a duck's voice. What sounds absurd on paper becomes a grotesque study of urban rot. The violence was so extreme that British censors refused to classify it at all. The BBFC's chief, horrified by what he saw, reportedly stopped the screening halfway through and said, "This film will never be released here." It was banned outright for nearly 20 years. Behind the scenes, Fulci defended the film as a reflection of a city corrupted by greed and moral decay. But the press didn't buy it. Newspapers called it depravity for its own sake. Audiences fainted, critics rioted, and distributors pulled it from theaters after protests. Still, in underground circles, it found admiration. Collectors traded rare VHS copies, and cinephiles later praised its gritty depiction of 1980s New York, a world where beauty and brutality blurred. Today, The New York Ripper remains divisive, condemned as trash by some, defended as social horror by others. It forced a generation to ask, when violence becomes art, who's really sick? The filmmaker or the audience? Number 4. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. Though produced in the early 70s, Thriller, A Cruel Picture became a staple of banned exploitation cinema in the 1980s VHS boom. This Swedish revenge saga, directed by Bo Arne Vibenius and starring Christina Lindberg, was rediscovered by Grindhouse fans who hailed it as the most vicious revenge film ever made. It tells the story of Frigga, a young woman rendered mute after a traumatic attack, who trains herself to become an avenger, mastering weapons, combat, and driving before exacting bloody retribution on those who wronged her. The film's reputation grew not just for its content, but for its defiance. It was banned or severely cut across Europe and North America, accused of moral corruption. The UK's Board of Film Classification outright refused it, claiming it blurred fantasy and obscenity. Yet it was precisely this collision that fascinated later filmmakers, most notably Quentin Tarantino, who cited it as the inspiration for Kill Bill's eye-patch-wearing assassin, Elle Driver. Behind the scenes, the movie was produced on a minimal budget and secretly shot under false pretenses to avoid authorities. Its gritty realism, slow-motion violence, and operatic vengeance style turned it into a lost masterpiece of the Grindhouse era. By the 1980s, it became a cult relic, smuggled across borders, whispered about in horror conventions, and treasured by collectors who sought the uncut version. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming power from a world that silences pain. Number 3. Men Behind the Sun, 1988. One of the most infamous films ever made, Men Behind the Sun was so graphic it shocked even exploitation fans. Directed by Tunfei Mu, this Chinese production dramatized the atrocities committed by Japan's Unit 731 during World War II, depicting human experimentation, biological warfare, and the moral collapse of empire. When released, audiences were horrified not only by its content, but by its realism. Rumors spread that the corpses shown on screen were real, that the filmmakers had crossed ethical boundaries to depict history. It was banned in multiple countries, including Australia and South Korea, and in others only released in censored versions. The film's intent, however, was not to glorify violence, but to expose it. Mu wanted to confront his nation's buried trauma, but censors accused him of reopening wounds. Some governments even labeled it anti-Japanese propaganda. Behind the camera, actors fainted, extras quit, and theaters that screened it faced bomb threats. Critics condemned it as beyond cinema, yet historians praised its commitment to confronting war's ugliest truths. Decades later, Men Behind the Sun remains one of the most controversial anti-war films ever made, studied, banned, and feared in equal measure. It didn't invent horror, it simply revealed it, without flinching. Number 2. Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, 1981. Few films embody the moral panic of the video nasty era, quite like Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. Directed by Romano Scavolini, this American-Italian hybrid followed a recently released mental patient plagued by violent hallucinations and uncontrollable urges. What made it shocking was not just its violence, but its psychological cruelty. British censors called it relentlessly sadistic. When the film was released uncut on VHS, police raided the distributor's offices, seizing thousands of tapes. Its distributor, David Hamilton Grant, was sentenced to prison under obscenity laws, making this the only video nasty to result in jail time. Behind the scenes, Scavolini clashed with special effects artist Tom Savini, who demanded his name be removed from the credits after claiming he was misrepresented. The production spiraled into chaos, mirroring the breakdown of its protagonist. Despite being banned for years, horror fans hunted for the uncut version, turning it into a grail of the underground. Critics now view it as an unsettling portrait of the fractured mind, not mere exploitation. Its real nightmare wasn't the gore, it was society's fear of what violence might reveal about itself. Number 1. Nekromantik, 1987. At the top of the Forbidden Pyramid stands Nekromantik, the film that even other banned directors called unwatchable. Directed by Jörg Buttgereit, this German shock film was banned in nearly every country it was screened in, and confiscated by police in multiple cities. The plot follows. A graveyard worker who brings home corpses for his lover, spiraling into a macabre meditation on death, loneliness, and decay. But beneath the grotesque exterior was a strangely poetic story about alienation in a modern world that had lost all emotion. The censorship was immediate, banned in Germany, the UK, New Zealand, and Norway. In some cases, it was labeled as an act of moral terrorism. Yet the director claimed it was a satire, an artistic provocation meant to show how love and death coexist in every human psyche. Shot on a minuscule budget in Berlin's decaying industrial zones, the film became an underground legend. Bootlegs spread across Europe in plain brown envelopes, watched in secret by art students and horror collectors. Over time, it gained cult status, influencing filmmakers from Lars von Trier to Gaspar Noé. Nekromantik wasn't just banned, it was exiled. But like all forbidden art, it survived, because curiosity always outlives fear. The 1980s were more than an era of censorship, they were a war zone for imagination. These films crossed lines, shattered norms, and forced societies to face what they tried to hide. Which one shocked you most? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we explore the dark corners cinema tried to bury.